Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Danica if you're new here. I'm a fifth year PhD student in clinical psychology, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between a PsyD and a PhD. And I know a lot of people who maybe watch these videos are interested in obtaining a degree in psychology, specifically a doctorate degree, and you might be asking yourself, which degree is best for me, a PhD or a PsyD? While there are some similarities, there are also some distinct differences, and so I'm hoping to chat a little bit about those differences and similarities and make this video informative and help in your decision-making process. A lot of this information that I'll be sharing with you today is information that I also have found in my research, in reading some articles, chatting with friends based on my experiences and things like that. So a lot of the information is a brief summary of those differences and similarities, but is not intended to encapsulate the entire experience of getting a PhD or a PsyD. Some of the information when talking about a PhD is shared from my perspective, as well as information that you can find online. But I think what really helped me go into depth about the PhD experience has really been because I'm currently in a PhD program in clinical psychology. So without further ado, let's just hop into it and talk a little bit about it. I hope that you find this helpful and look forward to hearing your thoughts and reading your questions about this. So let's start with PhD. I have my phone here to go through some notes to make sure that I am making sure I'm hitting all the points that I wanted to talk about today. So yeah, let's just get into it. So you're thinking about getting a PhD or a PsyD in clinical psychology. Let's talk about what it means to get a PhD in clinical psychology. Firstly, when we're talking about a PhD in clinical psychology, what we're really talking about is obtaining a doctorate in philosophy, where the degree really places an emphasis on scientific research and students' involvement in research. PhD programs follow what's called a science practitioner model, also known as the Boulder model. And the idea here is that psychologists should be knowledgeable in both research and clinical practice in order to be effective psychologists. PhD programs also operate under a mentorship model. So this means that PhD students are working directly under the supervision or mentorship of a doctoral faculty in the program. And if they're accepted to the program, they're also accepted into that specific lab. And so if you're accepted into that lab and you accept your admissions offer, that means you are working under that supervision of that faculty member for the next 4 to 5 years while you're on campus. This looks like leading research lab meetings, organizing and conducting research projects. So that would include going out into the field and recruiting participants, sharing files, collaborating with potential research partners or collaborative partners, attending conferences and presenting your research, whether that's in a poster format or in an individual talk, writing manuscripts for publication, and so forth. The requirement is that students are doing anywhere up to 20 hours of research per week. So that could vary across programs. My specific program is about 15 hours a week, 15 to 20 hours a week. And because students are heavily involved in research, they have the opportunity to receive funding while they're enrolled in the program. PhD students receive a stipend each year, and that stipend largely depends on the location of your program. So depending on that location, your stipend could be more or it could be less, depending on the cost of living. And it also depends on grant funding, whether your research advisor is heavily involved in grant writing and receives grants or received a grant during your time there. You may also be compensated for your time and your research involvement in that particular project that you're working on, if it's grant funded. PhD students may also receive tuition remission. So that means that the university will pay for any academic related costs, so like waiving tuition as well as fees. Some programs also offer PhD students the opportunity to receive a teaching stipend. So this means that you are being compensated or paid for your service in teaching undergrads. So in my program in particular, we receive our stipend through teaching. So you teach undergraduate classes, whether that's in person or whether that's online, hybrid model, what have you. And that is how you receive your stipend each year. So despite receiving funding, some PhD students do decide to take out loans just to make sure that their needs are being met and any additional costs that they may have. I think it's important to consider that during this time, you're an adult. Typically, ages range from anywhere from 25, 35, even 40. I'm considering being an adult who just transitioned out of college and now has these responsibilities and demands of life on top of school. It can be costly. So another obligation of a PhD student is to complete a master's degree. Some programs do require or may require potential applicants come in with a master's degree so that they, you know, sort of bypass that requirement and get straight into the doctoral level coursework. But a lot of programs will offer the opportunity for students to earn their degree along the way. When completing a master's degree, students are required to conduct research. So they're required to develop a research question, have a hypothesis, and be involved in the data collection process if necessary. And that process involves you doing statistics. So you would conduct your analyses and interpret the results using a statistical software program, commonly SPSS, some people use R. And once you've gone ahead and done all those other steps, you're now required to write up an introduction section, a method section, results section, and a discussion section. And you then present your findings to a committee. But before you even get to the defending part, I just wanted to note that you do have to propose your idea. So once you've come up with the research question or hypothesis or hypotheses, you have a committee that you then propose this idea and say, hey, this is, you know, what I'm interested in. This is what I really want to look at. Here's how I'm going to do it using this statistical analysis. And then leaving it up to the committee to ask questions about the way you're going to follow through on that design, and to see if it's even feasible, things like that. And then once that is approved, you then move on to defending your master's thesis. Once you've successfully defended your master's thesis, in my program, you earn your master's degree. In other programs, individuals will earn their master's degree after completing their comprehensive exam. So typically that's after the second or third year in some programs, and the comprehensive exam differs upon programs. It could be different prompts, essay prompts on specific topics that you've learned, or all topics really that you've learned in the 2 years that you've been there, so that fulfills the master's degree that way. So once you're further along in your PhD program, students are required to complete a dissertation. So this follows similar steps as a master's thesis, but at the dissertation stage, you're expected to be a little bit more independent and carry out a lengthier scholarly writing process that is comparatively more challenging or complex, I would say, compared to the master's thesis. And I think this piece is really important here, that most students who are unsure as to whether they want to do clinical work, research, or both tend to get a PhD because of its flexibility and versatility, in that you're trained in both domains. You're trained in research, you're also trained in clinical work, and you have the flexibility to choose which path ultimately you want to do in your career. So you may decide that you want to primarily do clinical work, or you might even decide that you want to teach. Some people also just get into solely grant writing, for example. So in a brief summary, those are the major components that make up a PhD experience in clinical psychology. So let's talk a little bit about getting a PsyD in clinical psychology. So a PsyD in clinical psychology is getting a doctorate in psychology. And in this program, there is a strong emphasis on clinical work and strong foundation on theory to inform the clinical work that you're doing. So PsyD degrees tend to focus more more on the application or applied practice of clinical work in psychology. So the training model in a PsyD program is focused on the practitioner scholar model, which focuses on the emphasis of practical application of clinical work. So there are a few PsyD programs that have a strong emphasis on research, making the research expectations and involvement greater. But traditionally speaking, PsyD programs differ from PhD programs in the sense of research involvement. PsyD programs don't have an official mentorship model. Typically, PsyD candidates applying to the program apply broadly to the program, and then once they're accepted, you could choose potentially a faculty that you'd like to work with because they have similar research or clinical interests as you, and you could sort of work informally with that faculty member to receive guidance throughout the program. So PsyD programs can cost anywhere from $33,000 to $44,000, resulting in over $150,000 that you're paying to obtain a degree over the course of the 4 to 5 years that you're enrolled in the program. So many students do take out loans to pay for tuition and support their needs and have that additional resources while they're in the program. But students could also receive funding through teaching assistantships, potentially graduate assistantships, and work-study related programs. However, not all students qualify for those assistantships and programs. So upon entering a PsyD program, some do require that PsyD students or potential PsyD students are coming in with a master's degree, but some do not require that and allow students to earn the opportunity to obtain a non-terminal degree in psychology, meaning that the master's degree is not the final degree that you'll be receiving in the program. Most PsyD programs do require a dissertation. I believe I interviewed at one program where the dissertation was actually optional. So some programs may have that option, but the dissertation is largely driven by the student's interest rather than conducting a dissertation based on their advisor's interests so that their advisor can adequately support them. Now, both a PhD and a PsyD are considered advanced degrees in psychology, and in most states you need a doctorate degree to be licensed in psychology, with a few exceptions with some states. And both degrees are governed by the American Psychological Association, also known as the APA for short. And while a PhD has a strong emphasis for research, both degrees require that students are gaining exposure and experiences in clinical work in various settings in order to prepare themselves for the pre-doctoral internship as the final requirement, or one of the final requirements and milestones in the program. So these clinical experiences before the pre-doctoral internship is considered a practicum site, where you apply to these sites, you interview, and then you receive an offer, and you are contracted to work in there is no payment for that, but they pay you in experience, and you are expected to work in that clinical setting with that agency organization for a year-long practicum. So you can work in places like a hospital setting, a VA, an outpatient clinic, counseling centers, for example, and providing clinical services to the population that your practicum site serves. So as I mentioned, you're accruing a lot of those hours to prepare yourself for the pre-doctoral residency or internship, and individuals are expected to apply during their final year. So that could be your 4th year, your 5th year, depending on how long you end up completing your degree. And that is where I'm at in my course of training. I'm currently in the process of applying for internship, and for me that would be my final year and one of the final requirements in order to complete my degree, the other one being successfully defending my dissertation. Some things you'd want to consider when thinking about a PsyD or a PhD. So PhD programs are generally more difficult to get into for many reasons, and it largely takes 5 to 7 years to complete the degree. So PsyD programs are also competitive, but have higher acceptance rates and usually takes about 5 years to complete. So PhD programs are often offered tuition assistance in exchange for teaching or research involvement. Both degrees hold equal weight. The decision as to whether you'd like to get a PhD or PsyD really depends on what you want to do, how you want to spend your time, and where you could see yourself working and doing in your career. So PhDs tend to work in academic settings, also known as academia, where they're involved in academic leadership positions like being a professor, having their own research lab, writing grants, for example, whereas PsyDs tend to work in maybe hospital-based settings, clinical settings, a prison, a VA, and so forth and so forth. If you really want to focus your career on the application of skills and knowledge in psychology, maybe getting a PsyD might be the good option for you. Regardless of which degree you decide to get, you're not just limited to therapy. You're expected as a clinical psychologist to be able to use research to inform your clinical practices. You're expected to be in program leadership positions. You may be involved in program development or even grant writing. The best piece of advice that I could offer those of you who are considering getting a doctorate degree in clinical psychology is to talk to people who are currently in these programs or who have graduated from these programs, and asking them very specific questions about their experience, and asking them questions that you might have that you couldn't find the answers to. So I wish you the best of luck in your journey. I hope this was helpful and informative for you all. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.